Gay nutcracker.
Let's see how Earth responds to that.
Welcome to TYT, I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and while I'll be doing the first segment solo today to give you some updates on the presidential election, later in the second segment of the show, Cenk Uygur will be joining me. I'm gonna be doing these election-related stories solo, considering the fact that Cenk Uygur is running in the Democratic primary, and we don't want to have someone with a conflict of interest weighing in on these topics. And we wanna, of course, protect the integrity and credibility of the show, so that is why he won't be here for the first segment. However, when he comes for the second segment of the show, we're gonna give you some updates on the ongoing war in Gaza. The aerial bombardments have now started up again. The number of civilian deaths continues to rise on the Palestinian side. A lot of updates to get to in regard to that. There is this very clear orchestrated effort to immediately deflect from what is currently transpiring in Gaza with that high civilian death toll by, I guess, pivoting to a discussion about sexual violence perpetrated by Hamas. We'll talk about that in detail and the asymmetrical coverage that we're seeing right now in corporate media. It wasn't like that in the beginning of the war, but that's certainly the case now. A lot of Democrats, corporate Democrats, are mad at Pramila Jayapal over the way she handled questions in regard to sexual violence committed by Hamas. Later in the second hour, we'll talk about one of the largest wealth transfers in American history, to the tune of $5 billion that's going to be transferred from parents to their children. So yes, it's an estate tax related story, but there's really important tidbits in there for you to know about, so you can kind of understand how wealth is really accumulated in this country and how inheritance plays a huge role when it comes to the accumulation of wealth. So we'll get to all of that later in the show. But if you are a member, you can look forward to an awesome bonus episode today where we will have a debate about whether or not a Folgers commercial dating back to 2009 promotes incest. Yes, that is a topic today. I think that there will be a little bit of a debate about it. So if you are a member, you can check that out. If you're not a member, just go to tyt.com/join. You can become a member that way, or click on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube, and you can join through YouTube and become a member that way as well. All right, without further ado, let's talk about what's happening with the Democratic primary, especially in a state like Florida. The state of Florida has already elected incumbent President Joe Biden as the Democratic Party nominee, even before a single resident in the state of Florida has casted a single ballot. Now, why is this the case? Well, it turns out that the state's Democratic Party has basically decided to make the most undemocratic move by refusing to hold a primary. They have canceled their Democratic primary election. So Biden will literally be the only Democrat on the ballot when the primary election takes place in Florida. So here's how it all went down. It's important to know that every state has its own rules in regard to how candidates make it onto a ballot. Like some states, for instance, will require petitions. Now in the state of Florida, the requirements are actually not that strict at all. In fact, one member of the Florida Democratic Party said the following. Let's go to graphic 3 here. There's no requirement for presidential candidates to do anything to get on the ballot. Interesting information for you to know about as I continue to tell you the disgusting moves that were made by Florida's Democratic Party. Here's what they did. So in Florida, the deadline this year for parties to submit a list of approved candidates to state election officials was November 30th, okay? That was the deadline, November 30th. Now here's what happened. According to the Florida Democratic Party communications director, the process to be on the Florida ballot has been publicly available on our website. It clearly states that the Florida Democratic Party's primary ballot is submitted to the Secretary of State by November 30th of 2023. This is the standard process. The state executive committee meets to vote to place candidates on the presidential primary ballot at the Florida Democratic Party's state convention every 4 years. So basically, if you're thinking about running, you're a Democrat, you submit your name as a candidate, and then the state Democratic Party holds some sort of convention in which the members will vote on those candidates and decide on who's going to make it onto that ballot. They have that convention every 4 years. Well, guess what? Here's the update. The 3 candidates were contacted by Florida Democratic Party officials on Wednesday, November 29th, so 1 day prior to that deadline, for the party to send the names of the candidates who would appear on the ballot. And were informed that the party's state executive committee had already met at the state convention on October 29th and submitted the approved candidate list to the Secretary of State on November 1st. So deadline is November 30th, but unbeknownst to anyone, okay, other than the members of the Florida Democratic Party, they had already held their convention on October 29th, and they're like, listen, we've already voted, and Biden got all the votes. Now keep in mind, Dean Phillips didn't even announce that he was running for president until October 27th. So 2 days later, Florida decides to hold this convention. The state Democratic Party in Florida holds this convention, and they do their vote, and oh wow, everyone voted for Biden. So Biden, they're canceling their primary. Biden will be the only Democrat on the ballot during the primary election in Florida, okay? Now, in other words, a month prior to that deadline, the Florida Democratic Party unilaterally made the decision to cancel their state's primary. That is what happened. Now, the fact that the decision was made way before that deadline, that the convention happened way before that deadline, and that candidates weren't even informed until 1 day prior to the deadline, honestly indicates to me that they didn't even want the candidates to have enough time to object or even fight back against what they did here. Okay, so let me just pause for a second. This is unbelievably authoritarian and undemocratic. Canceling the primary election in the state of Florida is a big deal. Florida has 250 delegates, 250. And they have denied the other candidates, that includes Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, Cenk Uygur, they have denied them the opportunity to appear on that ballot, and they intentionally withheld information from these candidates in order to prevent them from doing anything about the undemocratic moves that the Florida Democratic Party was engaging in. Okay, so keep in mind again that Dean Phillips launches his campaign on October 27th, and this decision by the Florida State Democratic Party was made 2 days after. According to Florida law, if there is one presidential candidate, neither the name of the candidate nor the names of delegates shall be printed on the ballot, and in this case, the election will be canceled. Now, so the question is, why were the other candidates excluded? Well, the Florida Democratic Party communications director said in a statement on Friday that all 3 candidates did not receive any votes at the October committee meeting. You know, the committee meeting that no one knew about, the committee meeting that they held and didn't let any of the other candidates know about? Yeah, that one. Now, Florida has more than 4.4 million registered Democrats, and those Democrats will not have a chance to voice their opinion or weigh in on the Democratic primary at all, because their state Democratic Party has basically made the decision for them. Now, mind you, this is the same Democratic Party that is running on this notion that if Joe Biden doesn't get elected, democracy's on the line, everyone. Democracy's on the line. What are we gonna do? Donald Trump is a threat to our democratic process. But behind the scenes, you have the Democratic Party ensuring that there is no robust Democratic primary. And mind you, they're doing that at a time when about 70% of Democratic voters are begging for anyone other than Biden, anyone other than Biden. Democratic voters aren't happy with Biden. Democratic voters signed on to the Biden campaign in 2020 because they felt that he was, at that time, the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. And remember, Joe Biden had promised Democratic voters that he was only gonna run for that one term and then he was gonna step aside. Oops, he lied. He absolutely lied about it. And look, if you look at the polling, it is abundantly clear that the other Democratic candidates are still behind considerably, okay? Biden has a giant lead over them, which to me makes it even more egregious and gratuitous that the Florida Democratic Party did what they did here. It's just, what are you guys afraid of? If Biden has this massive lead, why would you need to make this unbelievable, undemocratic maneuver to prevent the other candidates from appearing on the primary ballot? Now, according to Cenk Uygur, the Florida Democratic Party purposefully withheld valuable information from them to ensure that they wouldn't make it on the ballot. So let's hear what he has to say, and a little later we'll hear from Marianne Williamson as well.
All three of us are perfectly aware of the rules in every other state, and we have asked repeatedly the state of Florida through our campaigns what the rules are here so that we could abide by them. They never returned our calls or our emails to any of the campaigns. And then the day before the deadline, they say, oh, by the way, we made this decision. Not only did we make this decision, we made it a month ago, but we never let any of you guys know.
We made it a month ago and we didn't let any of the other candidates know. That is exactly what happened here. And again, it is egregious, it's undemocratic, and it shows that the Democratic Party really has no leg to stand on as they fearmonger about the threat that the Republican Party poses to our democratic process. Because right here we have a clear example of the Democratic Party engaging in something that is incredibly undemocratic. And again, let's take a look at the polling. If you look at the polling, you'll notice that the other candidates aren't, they don't have a lead over Biden. They're not even close. Okay, so Biden's at 77%, Williamson's at 8%, Dean Phillips is at 6%, and Cenk Uygur is at 2%. So why engage in this maneuver knowing that Biden has a lead, knowing that you are risking the negative headlines and the negative coverage that they're getting right now as we speak? It's just, again, yet another example of mainstream Democrats engaging in undemocratic behavior while simultaneously fear-mongering about the undemocratic behavior on the right. Now, this decision also takes away from those 4.4 million registered Democrats in the state of Florida, and that is unfair. I think it's incredibly unfair to Democratic voters. Look, say what you want about the other candidates, right? And I haven't endorsed anyone on the Democratic side, but you should give everyone who wants to run an opportunity to make their case. And in the state of Florida, the Democratic Party is saying, no, we're gonna decide on behalf of those 4.4 million Democratic voters. Now, with that said, the three other Democratic candidates have blasted the Florida Democrats in the state of Florida for doing this. I want to go to the next video where you're gonna hear from Marianne Williamson. By the way, they're planning on filing lawsuits in response to what is transpiring in Florida. Let's watch.
I think that the Florida statute itself is unconstitutional, giving that kind of power to the party. The party itself is a political committee. It's not a government agency, but it's playing a quasi-governmental function here, and it has no right to block democracy this way. It has a responsibility to the public good. And we all know that we're living at a time when our democracy itself is in crisis. We all know that the threats to democracy of them that are represented by people such as Donald Trump. But the irony here, of course, is that the Democratic Party claims to be trying to protect democracy, but their way of doing it is to suppress democracy. It's wrong, and it's also undercutting of the most basic rights. If we cannot assume that the people of the United States have fair and equal access to knowing even who their candidates are, then we don't have fair and equal access to the vote. And this is why this is a transgression of the 14th Amendment. And this is what we will be claiming in court if we have to.
She's absolutely right about that. And I really do hope that they pursue legal action against Florida's Democratic Party for doing what they're doing. Because this goes beyond who your preferred candidate is. This really is about protecting voters' right to voice who they prefer. Even if it's a long shot, even if their preferred candidate has no shot. It is ridiculous for the mainstream Democratic Party to make that decision on the voters' behalf. That is the antithesis of democracy. And finally, as Politico reports, go to graphic 6, Florida Democrats are in violation of the National Party's rules that required delegates to the Democratic National Convention be allocated in a fashion that fairly reflects the expressed presidential preference or uncommitted status of the primary voters, or if there is no binding primary, the convention and or caucus participants. Now, Nikki Fried, who's the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, disregarded concerns about them engaging in undemocratic maneuvering here. In fact, she viciously went after Dean Phillips and argued that he is engaging in conspiratorial thinking. Here's her exact quote. "We are dismayed by Dean Phillips's conspiratorial and inappropriate comments comparing the state of Florida to the Iranian regime as part of his knee-jerk reaction to long-established procedures. This is unbecoming of someone running for higher office." Now look, they might not like some of the hyperbolic language that Dean Phillips engaged in order to talk about the very clear undemocratic moves that the Florida Democratic Party is engaging in. But to try to pivot and deflect by calling the candidate that they're screwing over unbecoming, his behavior is unbecoming. No. Let's be absolutely clear here. I've got no love for Dean Phillips. He's a standard corporate Democrat, to be quite frank with you, but he's not in the wrong here. The Florida Democratic Party is in the wrong here. And while what I'm about to say is pure speculation, I have no evidence of it, I would bet my bottom dollar that the Biden camp is involved in this. That they don't want a robust primary. They don't want any challengers, and they're making it abundantly clear that they're going to squash the possibility of anyone being able to fairly engage in this primary process. And I think that's gross. I think it's incredibly gross. Because here's the thing, if I were Joe Biden, especially if I have that comfortable lead, I would make it known to the American people, right? That I find it abhorrent that the state Democratic Party in Florida is not giving the other candidates a fair shot. I'd be embarrassed, to be honest with you. I'd be embarrassed because I wouldn't want to make it appear as though I'm such an insecure loser that I need my minions in the state of Florida to squash the possibility of other candidates being treated fairly in this process. But he's not really speaking out about that, right? He's not speaking out about it at all. So it tells me something about the Biden camp. It tells me something about the Democratic Party, and it's not just about this election. We've seen them engage in shady behavior in other primaries and previous election cycles. And again, if the only thing Democrats are gonna run on in 2024 is, well, please vote for us because democracy is on the line, they really have no leg to stand on if they're gonna pull crap like this. All right, one more story before we take a break. And this also has to do with Biden, but it more has to do with the Latino vote. I find this story so fascinating, considering that the Black and Latino vote has really been a mainstay in the Democratic base for many, many decades. But things are starting to change, and it's important to understand why.
I think we could see the inflation. There's a lot of people that complain about interest rates.
When the economy is not doing great, when you support small businesses, you help the local communities also. And I haven't seen that with Biden.
Really, neither one of them deserve my vote. I almost feel like I should go some other route. Maybe somebody else will come up.
As we've been sharing with you all for months now, poll after poll shows that the Democratic Party's handling of the economy is leading to waning support among Latino voters. Now, the latest survey was done by Unidos US, and that poll is really no exception. So they didn't really talk about what it is that these voters are unhappy with Biden on. They just wanted to understand, what do Latino voters actually care about? Because there is this, in my opinion, mistake by a lot of Democratic candidates in kind of thinking they know what Latino voters are motivated by, what they're inspired by, what's gonna get them to the polls. But more often than not, what they end up doing is they treat this block of voters as a monolith, and they're not really hearing out what their main concerns are, what kind of policy issues they want addressed. And so let's talk about that in some more detail. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the margin of error for this survey is 1.8 percentage points. Pretty small margin of error considering other polling that we've talked about on the show before. But with that in mind, here's what we found. The poll asked Latinos to pick the three most important issues for Congress to address. Inflation and the rising cost of living were named by 54% of Latinos. Jobs in the economy came in second at 44%, and healthcare was third at 33%. So let's keep it real, ladies and gentlemen. Those are all bread and butter issues. At the same time, what you typically hear from Democratic candidates attempting to appeal to Latino voters is just nonstop emphasis on social issues, which they do care about. But to assume that they care about those issues, like immigration, for instance, far more than they care about their own economic well-being, I think is misguided, to say the least. And it's unfounded based on what we're seeing in the polls. Of those surveyed, by the way, 47% approve of how President Joe Biden has been handling his job, while 44% disapprove. So this polling, to some extent, is a little mixed because previous polling of Latino voters showed a lot more unhappiness, if you will, in regard to how Joe Biden has been handling his job. So in this poll, there are more Latino voters who are happy with how he's handling his job versus those who are unhappy with it. Clarissa Martinez de Castro, who is the vice president of Latino Vote and of the Latino Vote Initiative at Unidos US, says that given the income levels of the majority of the Latino population, pocketbook issues and economic concerns are driving the list of more deeply felt concerns at the moment, and notably that housing, this is important, guys, housing as a standalone issue has reached the top 5. Look, in the area of housing, I haven't seen anything from the Biden administration at all. And that is a big problem. Because when we talk about inflation, sure, you're experiencing inflation at the grocery store, you experience some inflation at the gas pump, and that's really something that Biden doesn't have a lot of control over. You know, gas prices really have more to do with the OPEC plus cartel, the oil producing countries, and the fact that many of them can decide to withhold production of oil, which will then drive down the supply and will increase the price at the pump as a result. But Biden could actually implement some policies that could alleviate the pain that Americans are feeling in regard to housing. For instance, he could push for legislation or maybe even consider an executive order that prevents, declares a national emergency in regard to housing. Once you do that as a president, you actually have a lot more leeway in terms of policy. You can kind of skirt the gridlock that you see in Congress all the time. And you can push for bans on foreigners in investing in residential real estate here in the United States as an investment vehicle when they have no interest in actually living here. You can also ban private equity firms from buying up entire neighborhoods of residential homes. You can do all sorts of things, but the Biden administration, of course, has been very hands-off, in my opinion, when it comes to the housing crisis. And that is now becoming more and more of a political liability. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm happy to see that. Because the only way politicians are ever going to listen to our concerns is if they see that ignoring our concerns is tantamount to political suicide. And so I hope this becomes more and more of an issue to the point where politicians have no choice but to finally, in a very robust way, address the real housing crisis that Americans are grappling with as we speak. Now, there's more. So about half of Latino support providing a path to citizenship for immigrants who came to the United States when they were children. That's actually a lower percentage than I would have expected. So even I thought that more Latinos wanted to do something for the Dreamers. But you also have to keep in mind, it is a mistake, in my opinion, to assume that all Latinos here are totally cool with the way the immigration system is working. A lot of them actually came here and went through an incredibly difficult process to become legal citizens. And so you gotta understand that component of it as well. When it comes to Immigration and Border Patrol, that actually ranks 6th in this poll. So that is not the #1 priority. It doesn't even make the top 5 for Latino voters. But the poll also found that most Latinos do not believe that Republicans would do a better job when it comes to the economy either. Asked who would better address the issue of inflation and the rising cost of living, 39% of Latinos surveyed said Democrats and 21% said Republicans. 51% said they would vote or lean toward voting for Biden if he were in a head-to-head race with Trump in the 2024 presidential election, compared to 33% for Trump. In Florida, Trump got a larger share of Latino voters, 45% to Biden's 39%, while Biden did best in Pennsylvania, 58% to 26%, the poll found. So that's the other thing. I mean, if you take a look at the Latino vote as a whole and look at what the popular vote is likely going to be, Biden still does pretty well among Latino voters. But you should also consider the fact that we decide elections based on the Electoral College, and the Latino population is not a monolith. Latino voters in Florida, who mostly consist of Venezuelans, Cubans, they tend to be far more conservative. So that's part of the reason why Democrats don't tend to do well in Florida these days when it comes to the presidential election. And remember, we've talked about other polls that have come out recently that have far worse results for Biden, including that New York Times Siena College poll, which found that the majority of Hispanics thought former President Donald Trump would do a better job on the economy, but that was based on responses from 235 Hispanic registered voters. And a Univision poll of 1,400 Hispanic registered voters conducted in September found that just 27% of the Latino registered voters polled believed Biden had a plan to deal with the cost of living and inflation, while 30% said they'd heard a little about his plan, but weren't sure it would deal with those issues. About a third said they didn't believe Biden had such a plan. Now, I know what the Biden defenders are gonna say. Oh, but he passed this groundbreaking legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Build Back Better, which of course was watered down considerably. But remember, even the so-called good provisions of those bills basically lead to more of this public-private partnership where private companies get grants from the federal government in order to carry out infrastructure projects or carry out certain programs that are supposed to help the needy in the country. But when you do that, the money tends to get misused, and the help for ordinary Americans tends to be watered down. And so we warned about that as the debates over this legislation were ongoing. We warned that rather than having the government carry out these services, ensuring that they're doing this without private corporations' involvement, that's gonna be a political liability in the long run, because the positive results of this legislation might be felt somewhere down the line, especially when it comes to the building or improvement of infrastructure, but might not even reach the Americans that it's supposed to reach, because again, it relies on private companies to carry out these services. And we know that there's money that gets misused. We know that they're slow to act and do what they're supposed to do in terms of following through with what they're promising as a result of these contracts that have been given to them by the federal government. So if you take a look at how Americans are talking about the economy, it's not good enough to simply say, oh, well, there is a record low unemployment rate. Okay, fine, but how are Americans able to pay their bills given the amount of money they are making through the work that they have? Are they making enough to afford housing? Are they making enough to afford, groceries and gas and all of that? If they're working hard and they're still unable to cover their bills, if anything, hearing Biden talk about Bidenomics and how wonderful the economy is, it's gonna anger them rather than persuade them that Biden's doing his job correctly or actually looking out for them and their best interests. All right, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we'll fill you in on the ongoing war in Gaza. Cenk Uygur will be joining me, and you guys will love it. We'll be right back. in our member section says, Anna, you're doing an excellent job talking about where the Florida Democrats went wrong. Then you took a dive off the deep end with an unsubstantiated opinion. Shame on you. Well, Donna, you got to tell me what the unsubstantiated opinion is. And if you're referring to me when I clearly noted what I was speculating about, I noted I was speculating. People are allowed to speculate as long as they're clear in noting that they're speculating. So anyway, I don't know what else to tell you. I get to have an opinion, I get to have my speculations, and I made that clear. Cray Cray Souffle writes in and says, what jerks, the DCCC doesn't want to lose a single percentage of Democratic voters in Florida to anyone who's not Biden. Marianne, Cenk, and Dean have a fight on their hands and hope their lawsuit is successful. And yes, Anna, don't fool yourself. The Biden campaign definitely had a hand in this insidious maneuver. Cray Cray Souffle, don't say that. You're diving off the deep end. Don't share that opinion. It's inappropriate. Eclectic Miscellanea says the word Democratic in Democratic Party is kind of like the word grape in grape soda. At one time, it may have vaguely resembled the name, but now it's basically just false advertising. All right, let's get back to the show.
I think it's kind of what we call speculation.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Song of Sparrow and Randy. We appreciate you guys joining. Membership makes this possible. I don't say that lightly, guys. That's just a stone cold fact. If we don't have enough members, we don't exist. So join buttons below, tyt.com/join. I hope you get it. All right, Anna.
All right, well, this is a segment where I'm gonna have some egg on my face because I made the mistake of taking the IDF's word at face value, and you should never do that, I guess. So let's talk about some recent reporting from Haaretz. Haaretz is now reporting that Israel did in fact lie about or embellish some of the atrocities that were committed by Hamas on October 7th. Now, they were clear in noting that there were in fact atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th, but there were certain things that were unproven and later shown to be complete lies or embellishments. So let's go through them one by one. First, they talk about the atrocities that are verified. And these atrocities make it abundantly clear to me that the IDF and the Israeli government really had no reason to lie or embellish anything that Hamas committed, because these atrocities are bad enough. As Haaretz notes, members of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as well as other Gazans who entered Israel, committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. They viciously murdered about 1,200 people, most of them unarmed civilians. They abducted about 240 people, both civilians and soldiers, including women and children, even a baby. So that's been verified. And those atrocities are bad enough without having to embellish anything, without having to lie about anything. There's more. A variety of evidence is available on Hamas's cruelty, which includes the murder of parents in front of their children and children in front of their parents. There were sexual assaults, rapes, and mutilations, while some victims were bound and some of the dead were desecrated. Some homes were burned with the people still inside. So again, Haaretz is abundantly clear, these atrocities happened. But again, certain things were lied about, certain things were embellished, and they provided specific examples. Ishay Cohen, a journalist for the ultra-Orthodox website Kakar Hashabat, interviewed Lieutenant Colonel Yaron Buskila of the IDF, their Gaza division. Buskila talked about babies who had been hung on clotheslines. His remarks were cited by a host of Twitter personalities around the world. Cohen wrote that he was later informed that the story was inaccurate and deleted the post. Quote, why would an army officer invent such a horrifying story? I was wrong, he added. The story was false, but Hamas terrorists did desecrate corpses during the massacre, especially the bodies of soldiers. There were also beheadings and cases of dismemberment. Now, what there isn't any evidence of is babies being beheaded. So it appears that that was also made up by the IDF. And I was incredibly angry with people who denied that that happened, Because in my mind, I was under the, even at this point in my life when I shouldn't be naive about anything, where I should be as jaded as humanly possible, where I shouldn't believe anything that comes out of anyone's mouth and I should find everyone suspect. I just couldn't believe that anyone would even dream up a lie like that. The beheadings of 40 babies. I just couldn't believe that anyone would lie about that. But I guess I was wrong. I have more evidence of what they lied about in just a moment. Cenk, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I once publicly said that line that now turns out to be propaganda about beheading babies, and I'm sorry about that. And I definitely should have known better. There's classic propaganda that comes out of every kind of war and conflict. The one that's the most common is also one of the ones that Haaretz disproves here, which is stabbing pregnant women in the abdomen and killing their babies in them. It's in every story of every war where you want to paint the other people as monsters, okay? And so when you see that story, I'm telling you right now ahead of time, 9 out of 10 times, it's a total fabrication. And why do they do it? Because it's the thing that revolts us the most. Imagine poor pregnant woman and the guy's, bayoneting or knifing the thing. In reality, what happened? Turns out that it was a woman who was, by the way, these are all terrible, like Anna said in the first place. It doesn't matter, you don't have to make up things. The things that happened were already horrific enough. A pregnant woman was shot and she lost the baby in the hospital. So there's 2 babies that died apparently. Now 2 babies is already infinitely too many. But okay, just there's a story about decomposing babies we're gonna get to in a second in a hospital in Gaza. There's 3 babies that died in that one. There was 8 that died in Al Shifa Hospital. So that's 11 babies right there. So now, what would Dana Bash do? She would come out and say, how dare you not condemn the 2 babies? What are you bothering to quote an Israeli newspaper for, giving you the reality of what happened and didn't happen? Well, how about the 11 Palestinian babies? No, that means you don't care about the Israeli babies. No. I'm sorry, but if you're all going around saying it should just be one-sided, you should only care about Israeli civilians, you should never care about the Palestinians, sorry, I don't agree, and you're monsters. So those 2 babies that died in Israel, it's horrific and unbelievably wrong, but don't bother lying about decapitated babies. And for IDF, you're nuts if you trust a word that the IDF says. Nothing but lies, 24/7, and if you believe them, you're just being so biased, it's ridiculous.
But like one other thing I'll say is, there was evidence of atrocities committed by Hamas, after October 7th. You see those videos all over social media. And again, I just find it so hard to believe that they would feel the need to embellish or add additional lies to the atrocities that Hamas actually did commit. And
yeah, so I don't find it hard to believe at all. Netanyahu is a serial liar. He lies about almost everything.
I get it.
He instructs, and his right-wing government is filled wall to wall, rim to rim with liars. And all they ever do is lie about Palestinians. So, and by the way, it's not just about Israel, guys. In every conflict, no matter what their ethnicity is, people always lie about atrocities. And so, but then when you tell the truth about Palestinian atrocities, they're like, shh, who cares? They're just Palestinians. Back up all the focus on Israel. All the focus on Israel. Don't you dare mention Palestinian babies.
Hold on, but let me finish my thought, Cenk, because the other thing I was gonna say is, even when you are skeptical of the way corporate media handles, especially this type of story, right? Unfortunately, the way they report things ends up unwitting to you, like seeping into your own mind. And so think about how they're immediately willing to question the veracity of the death toll in Gaza because they say, oh, it's controlled by Hamas, it's controlled by Hamas, it's controlled by Hamas. The Palestinian Health Ministry controlled by Hamas, you can't believe the death toll numbers, even though historically speaking, they've always been accurate, even though there are other humanitarian organizations who have their own death toll count, and they make it clear. In fact, there's a European group who has the current death toll at 21,000, and the Gaza Health Ministry has it at like 15,000 at the moment, meaning that they're actually more conservative with the death toll numbers that they put out. But at the same time, when it comes to anything the IDF has to say, Well, corporate media takes it at face value, they report it at face value, and they never question it. And so I think what ends up happening is that kind of culture, that way of covering the story, slowly but surely starts seeping into everyone's minds, where you think that the IDF is more credible than anything. And it's just not. This story makes it abundantly clear to me. I want to give you some other examples. According to sources, including Israel's National Insurance Institute, kibbutz leaders, and the police on October 7th, one baby was murdered, 10-month-old Mila Cohen. She was killed with her father, Ohad, on kibbutz Be'eri. So the notion that 40 babies were decapitated, it's just unfounded, hasn't been proven. And in fact, more and more outlets, including Haaretz, do not believe that actually happened. According to the National Insurance Institute, 5 other children ages 6 or under were murdered. 14 children ages 12 to 15 were killed in Israel in rocket strikes launched from Gaza, but not at massacre sites in southern Israeli communities. And also there's no evidence that children from several families were murdered together, rendering inaccurate Netanyahu's remark to US President Joe Biden that Hamas terrorists took dozens of children, tied them up, burned them, and executed them. So that was a lie. What Netanyahu said there was an absolute lie. Finally, I wanna go to some other examples. So no children ages 6 or 7. Okay, so there was another issue. So apparently there was an allegation that by a Zaka member. So Zaka is an ultra-Orthodox organization or group. They reportedly spoke about the body of that pregnant woman found at kibbutz Be'eri, whose abdomen had been cut open. So Cenk already shared with you how that was a lie. Well, that same person, that same Zaka member, repeated his account to Haaretz, adding that he actually saw this woman at house 426 on the kibbutz. He said this, "It was full of blood," he said. "When we turned her over, we saw that the abdomen was open, a knife was next to her, and we saw the fetus attached to the umbilical cord, and she had been shot from behind." He said that he found the woman next to the house's entrance and that a 6 or 7-year-old boy was found shot in the safe room. But here's the other part of the lie, aside from the pregnant woman. But no children, 6 or 7, or near those ages were killed. House 426 is in the Ashlem neighborhood, which largely houses kibbutz veterans, older people. So the notion that there was a 6 or 7-year-old child found there who was also shot was a lie. And here's another story that was spread just a few weeks ago. United Hatzalah president Eli Beer told of a baby that was placed in an oven and burned to death, but this story also is not true. 10-month-old Mila Cohen was murdered in the massacre along with the baby still in the womb of her mother, who died after her mother was shot on her way to the hospital. So again, it's like, no, there are atrocities that happen that are bad enough, that would have made everyone on Israel's side after what Hamas did, that would want Israel to root out Hamas following these atrocities. But they had to go the extra mile and lie about all sorts of things, which I just don't understand.
I know why they do it. So in another line that Haaretz broke down, they said that they hung babies on clotheslines. So why do you say such outrageous things and burning babies in ovens and decapitating babies? Because you want to build in the minds of your own citizens and citizens throughout the world that the other side is Nazis. And so what you're about to do to them, which is murder their civilians at extraordinary rates, is totally okay because they were Nazis who had it coming. So they're monsters, they're not human. So when we murder them, don't worry, we're not murdering actual human beings. We're murdering the Nazis who were burning children alive, okay? Yep. That's why they do it. That's why because the IDF was planning to murder as many Palestinian civilians as possible. If you catch feelings over that, I'm sorry, but they've done it in every conflict. In every conflict, they kill about at least 10 times as many Palestinian civilians as Israelis that were killed, whether they were civilians or soldiers. And then they go, oh, did we miss again? Oh, we missed again and again and again. Golly gee, we have the worst aim in the world. All we do is massacre civilians after civilians after civilians. And then Hamas is perfectly safe in the tunnels. And we showed you the video of the tunnels totally unaffected. But golly gee, I guess we couldn't hit the tunnels after we dropped thousands of 2,000-pound bombs in the middle of refugee camps, buildings, etc. Look, if you believe the IDF, you're a sucker. They never tell the truth. All of this is total propaganda. And again, for the 88th time in a row, or the 112th time in a row, the atrocities were bad enough. You didn't have to lie about them, but you just can't help yourself because all of those right-wing cabinet ministers knew they were going to go and kill an extraordinary amount of Palestinian babies and women and children and men and civilians. So that's why they put out those statements. So you think, oh, it's justified to kill all of them. And I want to give credit to Haaretz here, an Israeli newspaper that did a terrific job of outlining the actual atrocities and how terrible they were and the lies. And that's journalism, and thank you for having that.
When we come back, we'll talk about how if you're on CNN, you're not allowed to condemn what's currently transpiring in Gaza. You instead need to be hyper-focused on what happened on October 7th and pretend as though that all happened in a vacuum. We'll be right back.
Okay. There's another thing that's special about Israel. You can't ever criticize their military because that's also anti-Semitic. Imagine if I said you can't ever criticize the Turkish military because that would be racist. Everybody would look at you like you had two heads. What kind of a insane person would say that?
Yeah, we're gonna criticize whatever we want, and anyone can go ahead and throw any allegation against us for doing so. We're gonna do our jobs appropriately without fear. Yes. Period.
All right. Art Guy wrote in, so it's clear that the IDF is willing to tell egregious lies to push their agenda. Why should we believe anything they say ever again? Well, you shouldn't. And look, it's not that the IDF or the Pentagon lies every single time. It's that your assumption, your rebuttable presumption should be that they're lying. And then if they can prove that they're telling the truth, oh, okay, then no problem, then let's report it, okay? But the idea that you're just supposed to blindly trust these government defense forces and militaries. Yeah, if you're a sucker, but not if you're a journalist. Ironman 42 gifted a sub to Lynn Marie. We appreciate it on Twitch, and they've given 361 gifted subs. Amazing, you guys are the best. Octo Squiddies wrote in, the US justified the first war in Iraq by saying babies were tossed from incubators. Great point, excellent point. Israel fabricated stories of beheaded babies to bomb hospitals with premature babies. So when Saddam was doing it, we used to justify invading Iraq and killing hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians. When Israel does it, oh, they got a right to defend themselves. So did Saddam have a right to defend himself? It's not my logic, I think it's insane logic, but apparently if it's Israel, they can do anything they like. And the Progressive Carpenter makes a good point. Israel knew the attack was gonna happen over a year before. They did, then they let it happen. And then now they tell us, oh my God, we had to murder so many Palestinian civilians. Yes, they're murdering them, It's not, oh my God, I accidentally killed 15,000 civilians and got almost no one from Hamas. You know, IDF, with all their lies, they can't show one Hamas fighter they've killed. They're in the tunnels, they're here, they're all over Gaza. Where are all the dead Hamas terrorists? Oh, they're in the tunnels and the tunnels are totally unaffected. Almost everyone you killed is a civilian. And you knew that from day one. Monsters. Vince the Storm Chaser says, Cenk, I just want to say that you've had the biggest impact on my progressive views. Keep spreading the truth and stating the facts. Thank you. Really, thank you guys. And Philip Aguiniga writes in, Cenk, watched your appearance at the Breakfast Club and loved it. Keep up the good work spreading the message. Hopefully more people will lend you their platform for speaking truth. Thank you, and I think they will accept mainstream media, which is a hard ban on me. So, all right, journalism. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Brian, Bruce, and Disco Stu, thank you for gifting 5 Young Turks memberships. We appreciate you. Anna.
All right, well, we've got more updates on Israel. Let's get to it.
Hamas needs to be taken out. It is a terrorist organization.
How would you do that?
But I think the way to do that, as many terrorism experts have said, is to create a durable and strong coalition of allies within the Middle East, with the United States, with Israel, to make sure that we have a long-term political solution, that there is an alternative to Hamas to lead in Gaza and to establish a state for Palestinians. This is, I mean, we have to condemn what Hamas did on October 7th. We cannot allow for 15,000 Palestinians to date to have been killed.
Even as Israel's aerial bombardments of the Gaza Strip lead to more women and children losing life and limbs, the incessant deflections to what occurred on October 7th also continue, as if what's transpiring today as we speak isn't something that we should pay any attention to whatsoever. Now, as you heard from Progressive Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, she very clearly condemned Hamas. She very clearly referred to it as a terrorist organization, but it wasn't good enough for Dana Bash. In fact, she got real snippy when Pramila Jayapal had the audacity to call out the insanely high civilian death toll, which mostly consists of women and children in Palestine. So with that said, let's watch more of how that conversation went down.
I've seen a lot of progressive women, generally speaking, they're quick to defend women's rights and speak out against using rape as a weapon of war, but downright silent on what we saw on October 7th.
And I've condemned what Hamas has done. I've condemned
specifically
all of the actions. Absolutely, the rape, of course. But I think we have to remember that Israel is a democracy. That is why they are a strong ally of ours. And if they do not comply with international humanitarian law, they are bringing themselves to a place that makes it much more difficult strategically for them to be able to build the kinds of allies, to keep public opinion with them. And frankly, morally, I think we cannot say that one war crime deserves another.
So if you have two brain cells to rub together, what Pramila Jayapal said there was pretty clear. Right? We have higher standards for a so-called democracy and an ally of the United States. And slaughtering a high percentage of innocent civilians is going to lead to more extremism, and it's going to keep Israel less safe. She's very clear. She's condemning Hamas. She's condemning the sexual violence committed against women, Israeli women. But she's also saying, hey, but Israel needs to think a little more strategically about how they're carrying out these military operations. Dana Bash, not happy about that. Let's watch.
With respect, I was just asking about the women, and you turned it back to Israel. I'm asking you about Hamas. In fact,
I already answered your question, Dana. I said it's horrific, and I think that rape is horrific, sexual assault is horrific. I think that it happens in war situations. Terrorist organizations like Hamas obviously are using these as tools. However, I think we have to be balanced about bringing in the outrages against Palestinians. 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes, 3/4 of whom are women and children.
And it's horrible, but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
Well, Dana, I think we're not. I don't want this to be the hierarchy of oppressions. I think 15,000 people have been killed.
So rapes are abhorrent and absolutely should be condemned, which Pramila Jayapal did several times in the context of that interview. But you know what's also terrible? Slaughtering women and children on the other side. But you're not allowed to bring that up because it's considered equivocating. I don't think it's even equivocating, especially when you consider the numbers on the Palestinian side. We're just supposed to pretend like that doesn't exist? And by the way, like what more do you want her to do? Do you want her to burn herself alive in protest of what Hamas did? She condemned Hamas. How many more times do you want her to condemn Hamas before we can actually have a substantive discussion about what's happening right now, what's happening right now? Go ahead, Jane.
So I think this is a new trick. So this is a way of preventing any criticism of Israel. Because you ask someone, do you condemn Hamas? You go, yeah, of course I condemn Hamas. But we came on to talk about what Israel's doing in Gaza, so let me also criticize Israel. Oh, I can't believe you would do equivocation and say that it's a false balance. How dare you criticize Israel when we were talking about Hamas? Are you trying to cover up for Hamas? Well, okay, so this is a trick. So Dana Bash, admit that you're doing, and by the way, she started with a total lie. She started with, now, a lot of progressive women aren't criticizing rape. What, where, what, how? What are you talking about?
No, you should.
Where did you come up with that? What a preposterous lie.
Take her at face value, Cenk. She says it, so it must be true.
Oh yeah, what a journalist. Show me, and if, okay, so if this is the trick, they're like, well, Pramila Jayapal and other progressive women have condemned Hamas in all of these different ways. But they didn't mention such and such rape, so that doesn't count. So they didn't mention the rapes. Okay, Dana Bash. 8 premature babies dead in El Shifa Hospital, 3 dead in Al Nasser. Did you tweet about it, mention it publicly at all? If you didn't mention that Israel murdering those 11 babies, I guess you don't care about babies. I mean, you didn't say it publicly. You didn't say it publicly. So you're in favor of the terrorists, Dana Bash. I mean, this is your dumbass logic.
No, but honestly, at this point, Dana Bash, do you condemn what Israel is doing in slaughtering babies?
That's a real question.
Hey, Dana Bash, I haven't heard you. I haven't heard anyone on corporate media, any of these corporate media hosts condemn the barbarism and brutality of the IDF. Dana Bash, are you okay with premature babies being taken off of the machines keeping them alive? Or the babies who are left to suffer and die on their own as hospitals are forced to be evacuated? Is that okay? Do you condemn it? I mean, it's just so gross. And then you have the Democrats lining up one by one to condemn Pramila Jayapal as if she didn't very clearly, multiple times in that interview, condemn Hamas. Let's start with Debbie Dingell.
How would you have had your colleague answer Dana's question?
I'm going to talk to Pramila. I have a call into her. I think I'm going to just speak for myself on this subject, and I'm raw on this subject because of the hate that I have had directed at me for speaking the truth. I will speak the truth, and I don't care who it is. Rape is an act of violence, and it becomes too often a tool in any act of war. And as women everywhere, we must stand up for women everywhere.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, she's so disgusted with what happened with Hamas, and she should be. Obviously, this is an opportunity for her to condemn Pramila Jayapal while pretending to play nice. But let's just get a good hard look at who Debbie Dingell is, right? Because she's not on the record condemning the slaughter of innocent children in Gaza, the slaughter of innocent premature babies in Gaza. She has no problem with that. She hasn't said anything about it publicly, at least. But she has been on the record in regard to human rights for Palestinian children. Let's go back to 2019. This is a headline from the Detroit Free Press. Dingell withdraws support for bill promoting human rights for Palestinian children.
Vote her out.
Okay, so I looked into the piece because headline can be misleading, right? I wanted to read and see maybe there's a good reason why she was against humanitarian rights or human rights for Palestinian children. So the bill talked about how 500 to 700 Palestinian kids between the ages of 12 to 17 are basically detained by Israel every year, and they're prosecuted before a military court system that lacks basic and fundamental guarantees of due process in violation of international standards. So this legislation was meant to respond to that and expect better from Israel in regard to the prosecution of children. And Dingell wasn't in favor of it. She says, we must be committed to promoting a peaceful two-state solution that empowers the Palestinian people to live in dignity and security with Israel. After talking with many in my community about this bill, meaning the lobbyists, the pro-Israel lobbyists, come on, I felt HR 2407 was ultimately counterproductive to a peaceful two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. How exactly is the fair prosecution of children who have been detained by Israel somehow an obstacle to a two-state solution? Come on, Debbie.
Can you imagine if they said it in reverse? Well, look, I don't want to condemn Hamas for taking his children as hostages without any due process, because it would be counterproductive to a two-state solution. That would be a lunatic thing to say, right? But they say it about Israel. Oh yeah, they kidnapped a whole bunch of people. I detained them indefinitely with no charges. And they won't even bring him to a military court, which convicts them at a 99% rate. They have such little evidence, they won't bring it to a kangaroo court. But no, it's not kidnapping when a government does it. When a government does it, it's beautiful and should be respected. And they have a right to defend themselves by taking non-stop hostages from the other side. Okay, so, but the thing that bothers me the most is they're all pretending. And now no one knows. Like if you ask anybody that just barely is paying attention to this kind of conflict, but they heard about Pramila Jayapal, they'll all think that she didn't condemn Hamas or didn't condemn the rapes.
Exactly.
Because everyone in media and every politician is pretending she didn't condemn them. When we showed it to you, you just saw it with your own eyes and you heard it with your own ears. Several times she condemned Hamas and said they have to be rooted out completely. And she said the rape, it was terrible and horrific. I mean, what else do you want her to say? Say what you want her to say and be honest about it. Here's what they actually want her to say. Oh, those Palestinians, they're such monsters and savages. It's all their fault. Oh, Israel, no, I can't criticize Israel because you already asked me to comment about Hamas. Because it can't happen in the same interview. Otherwise, we'll say false equivocation. This is our new trick for protecting our beloved Israel, okay? And look at what Dana Bash said there. She's like, well, Israeli soldiers don't rape Hamas and Palestinian women. Wait, hold on. Well, before we even get to any rape or anything like that, 15,000 dead civilians in Gaza. A huge percentage of them women. So Israeli soldiers do drop bombs that crush the skulls of Palestinian women, that burn Palestinian women alive. That's what happens when you drop a bomb on someone. Are you gonna pretend that's not what happens?
Yes, they are, and that's what they're doing as we speak. And by the way, the atrocities committed by Hamas were awful and should be condemned.
Obviously.
But what is currently happening in Gaza is currently happening in Gaza as we speak, with our money, with our bombs. And so the point of having these discussions in regard to what Israel is doing is to apply pressure so Israel stops doing it. But you're not allowed to have that conversation. You're not allowed to have that conversation. Sorry, Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, so Dana Bash, have you condemned what Israeli soldiers are doing? What the IDF is doing, what Israel is doing? Have you condemned burning all those people alive when they drop bombs on them? Oh, you haven't. What kind of monster does that make you? And that one's real. Before, when I was doing the hyperbole, I'm saying, how would it feel if you said this? But in this case, all you're doing is running cover for Israel in this case. Don't criticize Israel. How dare you? They're allowed to burn as many women as they like. Oh, they're civilians. Who cares? They're Palestinians. Why don't you just be honest for the first time in your life and just say it? Just say it. You don't care about Palestinian women. Okay, so Israeli women dying, we all agree, we say it, Pramila Jayapal says it, every progressive says it. It's horrible, horrific, Hamas shouldn't have done it. But when it comes to Israel killing women, all of a sudden we're divided. We say it's terrible, and Dana Bash and all those politicians come out and go, not horrible. Not horrible.
Okay, so let's be fair. Unlike Dana Bash, let's be fair. Dana Bash doesn't say it isn't horrible. It's just that she wants to immediately pivot away from a discussion about how horrible that is. And by the way, you want to talk about rape? Okay, we could talk about rape. There was actually a different CNN program featuring the State Department official who actually quit, veteran of the State Department, Josh Paul, who quit over the US arms transfers to the IDF, to Israel. So Josh Paul actually talked about the topic of rape while speaking to Christiane Amanpour. Take a look at the video.
I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Moskobia in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual atrocities, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights. We are looking at a situation where there is so much dehumanification, where people are not seen for the value that they have. And I think that's true whether you're talking about those who are attacked on their kibbutz or those who are attacked in their homes in Gaza.
So can we have a conversation about that, Dana? Is that okay?
How come she didn't tweet about it? Dana Bash has never said anything about that 13-year-old boy being raped by Israeli soldiers or whoever did it in the prison. Let's be fair. How come you haven't condemned it? That's it. According, not to my standards thinks this is insane. But according to Dana Bash's standards, she's pro 13-year-old rape. Because she didn't condemn it. She didn't condemn it. And don't you dare ever mention Palestinian atrocities, because you can't condemn that and mention Palestinian atrocities at the same time. That's your new standard. That's your new standard. We're only allowed to talk about that one issue. You like your new standard? This is absurd. Why don't you, look, this is just a protection racket for the Israeli government and its atrocities. Yep. And every time you say that it's a false equivocation when Israel has killed more than 10 times as many civilians, what you're saying is those civilian lives don't actually matter, because I don't think Palestinians are human beings. And that's actually real. To say, how dare you equivocate Hamas and Israel when Israel has only killed 10 times as many people as Hamas. Okay, then you're admitting you just don't care about Palestinian lives.
They're literally bombing ambulances, okay? Dozens of doctors have died in Gaza. Dozens of journalists have died in Gaza. The number's quickly approaching 100. I mean, and it's continuing. That is the reason why people want to have that conversation. That kind of carnage is continuing. You can't go back in time and stop Hamas from doing the disgusting atrocities it had committed on October 7th. But the hope in having the conversations about what Israel is currently doing is, again, that it could potentially apply enough pressure to prevent the slaughter of innocent people.
And Hamas is not our ally. Israel is our ally.
Exactly.
We give money to Israel. We don't give money to Hamas. We just gave $14 billion more to Israel to bomb more Palestinian women and burn them alive, babies, and burn them alive when they drop bombs on their buildings. What are you gonna do? You're gonna pretend that's not what happens when you drop a 2,000-pound bomb on a refugee camp or a residential building? Go ahead, do more propaganda. Pretend you're a journalist until the whole time say, don't anybody ever criticize Israel, okay? And then watch, they'll come back around and say, even though we said it how many times did we say it? You can go count how many times we said Hamas was wrong and committed atrocities. I bet you they watch this video and then they come out and lie all over media and go, oh no, they didn't condemn Hamas enough.
Right, no, to 100%. And guess what, we don't care.
We don't care,
yeah,
we do the truth here.
Exactly.
We do the truth about all sides here. We don't do propaganda for a living.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, Lindsey Graham weighs in on this whole debate. So we've got that and more coming up, don't miss it.
Now I'm gonna do something very different here and read some one-star reviews of the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Donnie Franchise said, pretty much it's like listening to a trash compactor. Someone else said, negative, anti-American propaganda. And others said, out of context, misquotes, typical leftists who are afraid to debate, just smear. These two would be perfect for CNN or MSLSD. Well, Donnie, you might have a point, because I feel like a trash compactor right now after taking in all those garbage reviews. But thanks for listening anyway. We are, in fact, unapologetically progressive. And if you're not ready for bold commentary, then we're not the show for you. On the Young Turks, we speak up about the issues that matter, and we want to make positive change happen. And now here's why we actually do the show. Mariel Morales said, found this podcast from the True Crime Podcast, Fruit Loops, and other great progressive podcasts. I've become an instant fan of the Young Turks. Great conversation, great takes, very well composed, factual podcast, very informative. Love to hear that. Z55 said, it's a joy to experience such awareness and intelligence from fascinating people. And Anna is gorgeous and brilliant. Apparently I'm just fascinating, but I'll take it. Paul for Progress said, news well delivered. Appreciate it. KOOK said, Democrats and Republicans are fair game for TYT. And if Anna or Cenk provide disinformation about anything, they will admit they made a mistake and correct it. We appreciate you noticing that we are honest. To people who actually listen to the substance of the show, thank you. Your listenership supports what we do. Leave a 5-star rating for the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Let's take the ratings back from the trolls. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together. Times are tough in America. The cost of living is through the roof. But mainstream media doesn't talk about the stories that actually matter to your everyday life. At TYT, we cover the stories that corporate media wouldn't dare to talk about. But we need your support to do it. You can't put a price on fighting for positive change. So become a TYT member at a price that's right for you. So that way you get to pick the price. When you go to tyt.com/join, scroll down to the name your price option, and you can become a member at a price point that makes sense for you.
The only reason I'm here is because you are a friend.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, more news.
Unfortunately, Lindsey Graham is in the headlines today, and we're gonna talk about him because of some of the outrageous things he said. Let's watch.
They believe that too many Palestinian civilians have been killed. Do you agree with that?
Well, tell us how to do it differently. Yeah, what is too many people dying in World War II after Pearl Harbor? Did the American public worry about how many people were dying to destroy Tokyo and Berlin? I know this is not the same, but it's similar. I mean, after October the 7th, Israel's at total war with Hamas.
Just a reminder that despite what you just heard from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, following the atrocities that were committed during World War II, international laws were established in order to prevent the slaughter of innocent civilians during these types of wars. But that's neither here nor there for someone like Lindsey Graham, who is known as a war hawk, as he sits comfortably in the Senate without any worry about his life being threatened as a result of the type of terrible policies and wars that he promotes day in and day out. Now, since that week-long pause in fighting has come to an end, Israel is back to bombing northern and southern Gaza, which is causing the civilian death toll to rise sharply. Now we'll get back to Graham in just a moment, but it's critical to understand what he is providing justifications for. Let's watch.
The IDF releasing new video and confirming its forces are on the ground in every area of the Strip. And from the sky, relentless bombing. The IDF saying they've carried out around 10,000 airstrikes since the start of the war. Israeli missiles striking a residential building in the south this weekend, in video circulating online. And here you get a sense of the carnage and horror after a missile strikes. These boys crying for their father. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians moving to the south, seeking safety there. This young man crying for his brother. So many desperate images emerging. UNICEF saying nowhere is safe in Gaza. And there are so many young victims. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry reporting more than 700 killed since the ceasefire collapsed Friday. More than 15,000 dead since the start of the war. The US pushing Israel to better target its strikes.
So there are specific stories about ambulances being bombed. Keep in mind that they are they're using 2,000-pound bombs. They're known as bunker busters that has been given to the IDF by the United States. Typically, especially in densely populated areas like the Gaza Strip, those types of bombs are not used, but Israel doesn't have to abide by the same standards that other countries typically have to abide by as they're engaging in war. And so they continue to do what they're doing with the cover of the United States and with the allegations by the Biden administration that they're really receptive to calls for them to minimize civilian casualties. But there is absolutely no evidence of the Israeli government or the IDF taking any measures to minimize civilian casualties. In fact, they've put out leaflets with QR codes that people can scan in order to find out where the safe zones are. Number one, considering the fact that internet connection is pretty difficult in a place that's being just inundated with aerial bombardment, it's kind of hard for them to access that map. And even if they do, it turns out that the area that they've been told to go to is a literal desert with nothing in it. And I mean, what are they supposed to do there? There's no building, there's no water, there's no food, there's no nothing there. But that's where they can go, Cenk, if they want some safety. By the way, Netanyahu has called for the thinning of the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. The thinning of the Palestinian population. Gee, I wonder what that means.
Yeah, it means genocide. And if you're uncomfortable with that word, it's not, the word isn't the problem. The action is the problem. You should be livid with Netanyahu for saying a phrase that basically means genocide. Oh, you're mad at us for reporting what Netanyahu said. And that's kind of interesting. So maybe you should look into that. So look, I say this rhetorically to terrorists all the time, which is, they tell you, oh, you put on a suicide belt and you'll do it for Allah and you're gonna go to heaven. Whenever anybody tells you that, is a very clear thing you should tell them. You first. If it's so good and Allah's gonna reward you in heaven, you first, okay? You should be my role model, okay? And after you blow yourself up, I'll make up my mind after that, okay? I would say the same thing to Lindsey Graham and all the people that are advocate for all these wars. If you're gonna vote for a war, including sending money for a war, then you go to the front line. Well, why not? You think it's such an important cause, and he used to be in the armed forces. So go ahead, go to the front line. I wanna see you there in Gaza. Otherwise, don't tell us about how we have to spend $14 billion dropping bombs on civilians and that killing civilians is no big deal. Lindsey Graham sounds exactly like a terrorist. The terrorists say the same thing. Killing civilians is no big deal. So guys, we showed you on this show video from the IDF showing the tunnels perfectly intact. Hamas, the actual fighters, are in the tunnels. The IDF acknowledges that. So every bomb dropped by Israel on Gaza is an act of terrorism. It is not affecting the tunnels at all. It's not affecting any Hamas fighters. It's just killing civilians.
So the IDF, this is their own admission, okay? They've been on cable news saying it. They claim that they have killed somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 Hamas fighters, Hamas militants. Now, the death toll is low estimate, 15,000. So out of that 15,000, only 2,000, let's give them the high estimate with the Hamas militants.
They've shown no actual fighters.
They haven't, okay, but let's take, even though I suggest you never take the IDF's word for it, let's, for the sake of this discussion, take their word for it and say that only 2,000 out of the 15,000 deaths in the Gaza Strip were Hamas militants. I mean, look at that ratio. How do you justify what's happening? Let me give you some more details about what's happening in Gaza so you understand why you're gonna hear Lloyd Austin make the kind of statements he did in regard to Israel and how it's carrying out its military operations. So NBC News published a story with this headline. Let's go to graphic 2. Abandoned babies found decomposing in Gaza hospital weeks after it was evacuated. So I want to warn you guys, the details I'm about to share with you are incredibly difficult to hear, difficult to read about. So if you have difficulty hearing this stuff and you would rather not hear it, this is your opportunity to tune out. But for those of you who want to know the truth about what's happening, let's get to the details. Mohammed Balusha, a journalist with the Emirati TV channel Al Mashhad, said he found the decomposing infants when he entered the pediatric ICU in the health facility in Gaza City. The hospital staff and critically ill patients were forced to evacuate in early November as the Israeli military focused its ground assault on the city with hospitals under fire. Seen in a video that moves through the abandoned and disarrayed hallways of the pediatric intensive care unit at Al Nasser Children's Hospital in northern Gaza were several babies whose unattended bodies lay on separate hospital beds. So on November 10th, doctors, patients, and hospital staff were forced to evacuate that hospital. Israel made it clear that they were going to start bombing it and that it was unsafe. And they couldn't move the babies for good reason. Our evacuation from Al Nasser Hospital was very difficult and under fire. Children cannot be carried by hand or evacuated without oxygen equipment. So as a result, they had to abandon those babies. Filmed about 2 weeks after the hospital was evacuated, the footage appears to show at least 3 of the 5 dead infants with their bodies putrefying in close proximity to catheters and ventilators. One baby is seen decomposing while lying alone, appearing to still be connected to an oximeter with a green oxygen tank nearby. As insects appear to crawl on its chest, a bed sheet is used as a soft pillow, and an empty bottle and a medical glove box are shown closer to the bed's edge. Okay. So it's stories like that that I think led to what you're about to hear from Lloyd Austin, because he says, look, we gotta be better, Israel's gotta be better with their strategy here. Let's watch.
This kind of a fight, the center of gravity is the civilian population. And if you drive them into the arms of the enemy, you replace a tactical victory with a strategic defeat. So I have repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative.
That's Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. He was speaking at the annual Reagan National Defense Forum in California. And Lindsey Graham was asked to respond to what he said there. And here's what he said.
He's saying that civilian casualties could create even more enemies. Does he have a point?
No, he's so naive. I mean, I've just lost all confidence in this guy. How about focusing on protecting our soldiers, men and women in Syria and Iraq? Strategic defeat would be inflaming the Palestinians. They're already inflamed. They're taught from the time they're born to hate the Jews and to kill them. They're taught math by if you had 10 Jews, you kill 6. How many would you have left? It's like this is a tranquil population only inflamed after Israel goes in to defend itself. Is really naive. This is a radicalized population. I don't want to kill innocent people, but Israel is fighting not just Hamas, but the infrastructure around Hamas.
The infrastructure around Hamas, what does that mean exactly? By the way, the top song in Israel right now talks about slaughtering people like Gigi Hadid because she has the audacity to call out the war crimes committed by Israel. But it's just Palestinians who are fed anti-Israel propaganda, anti-civilian propaganda. So we should pretend as though there's none of that going on in Israel right now as we speak.
Yeah, let me address both of those. First, this absurd circular reasoning of the Palestinians hate the Israelis or the Jews, and that's why we have to occupy them. At what point in the brutal 56-year occupation were they supposed to love you? Like, really? I mean, what kind of insane standard is this? Oh, the Palestinians don't love the Israelis enough. Let's keep occupying them. I mean, which people would react that way? Oh, name an ethnicity. Oh, the Turks are occupying us. Yes, we love the Turks. Which lunatic would say that? And then if the Turks turn around and go, well, they don't like the Turks. That's why we had to kill all the Armenians. That's why we had to keep them under our thumb for 500 years. They don't like the Turks. When the hell were they supposed to like you? At what point were they supposed to like you? It's an insane request. And to Anna's point, look, are there wonderful Israelis who actually care about Palestinians? Yes. Are there wonderful Israelis who actually help Palestinians? Yes, okay. But are you telling me everybody in Israel loves Palestinians? Is that the joke that you're telling on TV right here? No, tons and tons of Israelis despise Palestinians and treat them as subhuman and then imprison 5.5 million of them in their open air prisons. So who hates who? Please. Now, to his point about civilians, which is worse, he says they're a radicalized population. That is a Hamas talking point. Hamas says Israel is a radicalized population that votes for our occupation, that votes for right-wing governments, that terrorize us and bomb us. That's why we should kill their radicalized population. It's not a tranquil population. That's literally what Lindsey Graham just said about the Palestinians. So Lindsey Graham, as usual, agreeing with terrorists. And he says, I've lost confidence in the defense secretary because he's saying don't kill too many civilians. By the way, he didn't say don't kill any civilians. He didn't say stop the war. He didn't say any of that. He just said, hey, can you be a little careful around killing civilians? And yeah, there's a moral imperative, but also strategically that could hurt our interests. So because then they might hate us more. And then if you murder their moms or grandmas, then they might then do terrorism against Israel and America, etc. He's like, I've lost confidence in him. He doesn't want to kill enough civilians.
It's just so
Lindsey
stupid.
Graham's a well-known terrorist who's always wanted to kill civilians. He says it on TV, and unfortunately our terrorists are in the Senate.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears entirely, talk a little bit about the ongoing efforts by House Republicans to open an impeachment inquiry against Joe Biden. It's going as comically as you would expect it to go. So we've got that and more coming up, don't miss it.
All right, so on Wednesday, there's a Republican debate, and we always cover the Republican debates at TYT. This one's a unique one because John Iadarola from Naaman's Report is going to host it. He's going to moderate a discussion of myself, Marianne Williamson, and Dean Phillips reacting to the Republican debate. And so that's what that graphic is about that you've seen there. It's at 10 o'clock Eastern, right after Republican debates. All three of the candidates opposing Biden in the Democratic primary will be on. Obviously, I'll be on there in the context of a candidate and not a host. John is going to be hosting. Okay, so that ought to be very interesting. Let's go to YouTube Super Chat. Storm Herald 13 said, the journalists on the ground have all posted their goodbyes. Bisan, my favorite, said she doesn't expect to live past a week or two. I feel helpless. Imagine you and your family are in Gaza right now. Bombs are dropping everywhere. At any moment, a bomb can drop on you. And worst case scenario is you don't get killed, but your family does. And you're just supposed to sit there and take it. And you're supposed to love the people who are dropping the bombs on you, because that's a reasonable expectation. And then you're gonna be blamed for not loving them enough. Box writes in, the more I look at this situation, the more I see that both sides wanted a war and they got a war. I have a hard time giving an F at this point. Well, then that makes you a bad person, sorry. Okay, because it isn't both sides. Hamas started the war. You know, Hamas has lost popularity since they started the war in Gaza, okay? Because that means the Palestinians aren't in favor of it. And they're not killing Hamas. Hamas is in the tunnels. They're killing Palestinian civilians. And Hamas killed Israeli civilians. If you don't care about that and you go, oh, they're both killing each other, sorry, but that doesn't make you a very good person. Sorry, get better. You're not supposed to care about the fighters. You're supposed to care about the civilians. Disco Stu said, well, let me read the critical comments first. Caroline Roberts said about the decapitated baby story. This is why I dropped my membership. I told Cenk. Well, Caroline, did you come back now? Okay. Me being me 24 said, we tried telling you to, but you all immediately shut down leftists like in Oakland. No, The
leftists in Oakland referred to Hamas as freedom fighters, okay? How's that freedom working out for you guys? Okay, I'm not gonna ever make excuses for the atrocities committed by Hamas. Innocent civilians on both sides should be protected. And if you don't like that, if you think I should provide cover for the lunacy that was demonstrated during that city council meeting, sorry, you're gonna be disappointed. I refuse.
Disco Stu wrote in, what keeps me coming back every day is the mainstream media would never admit they were wrong, but you always do, even knowing that people will be ruthless in the chats. Thanks as always, much love. Guys, there's a giant difference between saying, hey, the decapitated babies were propaganda and Hamas was totally innocent. Those are two different things. They were not innocent and that didn't. Cenk and Anna, more news.
Let's get to Republicans. This is supposed to be a lighter story to some extent. It's hard to get into the mood for a lighter story, but anyway, with that said, let's get to the clownish behavior of House Republicans and their failed impeachment inquiry into Biden.
I don't understand why you have had to take so long to actually get a vote to impeach or get this impeachment inquiry going. Do you feel that you have the votes within the House right now to get a formal impeachment inquiry?
I do.
Do you? Now, House Republican Congressman James Comer and other House Republicans who have been attempting to engage in a political impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden have been embarrassing themselves over and over again, to the point where even Maria Bartiromo's like, yo, what's going on here? Do you guys really have the votes for this? Now, Comer and Republicans in the House Oversight Committee have been trying to persuade the more moderate members of the Republican Party to join them in their embarrassing and evidence-free quest at a politically motivated investigation into the Bidens. But Comer would like you all to be as delusional as he is in believing that there are enough votes to actually launch this impeachment inquiry. So let's watch more of what he had to say.
We were in Washington, D.C. for 10 weeks, and there are about 15 or 20 moderates that they really worry about what CNN says or what the Washington Post writes, and they were getting in their head, Maria. But a great thing happened during Thanksgiving. The members went home. many of them for the first time and circulated for the first time in over 10 weeks. And they met people in Walmart and people on Main Street. And they're like, what in the world have the Bidens done to receive millions and millions of dollars from our enemies around the world? And did they not pay taxes on it? So they heard from their constituents, yes, we want you to move forward. We want to know the truth. And we expect the Bidens to be held accountable for public corruption.
It'd be great if they are guilty, if Joe Biden is guilty of public corruption. I mean, we would have seen the evidence of that by now. I mean, I'm sure that House Republicans, including James Comer, the head of the House, the committee basically investigating Joe Biden, they would have shown us that evidence the second they got their hands on it, but they haven't. It doesn't exist. And so Ian Sams, who's a spokesperson for the White House, says, Jamie Comer, meaning James Comer, Burisma, it's the talk of Walmarts nationwide, kind of clowning Comer and House Republicans who are still going on and on about this. But Cenk, you kind of had a different take, right? Because Ian Sams in the White House seem to think that this isn't true, that Republican voters aren't going up to these members of Congress and demanding the investigation move forward. You think that that is happening?
I definitely think it's happening. So look, the Walmart line might be silly, but did the Republicans go back to their districts and hear from Republican voters that they want Biden impeached no matter what? Yeah, I'm positive that happened. Why am I positive? Because I see the polls and I see story after story, and you go on social media, every piece of evidence there is indicates Republican voters want Joe Biden impeached, and they don't care why. And you don't have to give them any evidence. In fact, they'll be furious if he isn't impeached, even if there is no evidence. There's no evidence that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Evidence is optional. They don't care. They're saying, go get them. Go and impeach him because Trump was impeached. And that hurt our feelings. So we want you to do likewise to Joe Biden. Look, people aren't getting it. For a lot of Republican voters, they care about power, not principles. They talk about principles, the Constitution and freedom and all that stuff. But the minute there's an ability to cancel someone on the left, they love cancel culture. The minute that there is some injustice to do to a Democratic politician, they love it. And they don't care about the injustice, they don't care about any of this. They're just telling their representatives, do your job of representing us. We don't give a damn about the evidence, so you shouldn't give a damn about the evidence. Just impeach the guy, who cares?
So look, this is like the one area, and it's a minor thing, I guess, and it's a difference in perspective on whether Republican voters genuinely think that Joe Biden did something wrong versus them knowing that he did nothing wrong, but wanting to pursue a politically motivated investigation and impeachment inquiry anyway. And look, I gotta be honest, whether you're talking about typical mainstream corporate conservative media or independent media or digital media, like Tim Pool. Tim Pool is totally convinced that Joe Biden is guilty. And he compares Joe Biden to, he basically says what Joe Biden has done is worse than what Donald Trump was accused of in his first impeachment. Remember, that was when Trump withheld congressionally appropriated funds to Ukraine in an effort to get Ukraine to announce a sham investigation into Biden in order to get a leg up in the 2020 presidential election. So I give you that example of Tim Pool because it doesn't matter what kind of conservative media you're consuming. If that's all you're consuming, you are definitely under the impression that Joe Biden is engaged in a corrupt scheme to profit out off of the foreign business dealings of his son, even though there's no evidence of it.
Yeah, so I've talked to tons of Republicans as I travel the country. And Anna, you're making a fair point, but there's an important nuance in there. So do they actually believe that Joe Biden has done something wrong? Yes, to be fair to Republican voters, they believe it with all their hearts. But when you ask them for evidence, they always get emotional. They always say, you didn't see Hunter Biden. No, I did see Hunter Biden, but I didn't see any evidence connecting Hunter Biden to Joe Biden. Oh yeah, you're trying to protect the Biden crime family. All right, dude, just hold on. Show me one piece of evidence where Joe Biden says, oh, go get me the money, Hunter, or Hunter says, hey, I'm sending the money now, then I'll vote to impeach him.
100%.
Right? Like I'd be 100% in favor of it. But there isn't any evidence. That's why they've never shown it to you. You think that the Republican Congress people are sitting on the evidence, but they don't want to share it?
Yeah, seriously.
Come on. But their bias is so clouding their judgment that they can't see straight. I had an Uber driver who was almost yelling at me about, oh, of course they're connected. I know, brother, but no, I don't know. It's not true, but okay, but give me why, how, right? They're like, oh, they're calling him the big guy. What does that mean? That's not evidence.
I know.
They called him the big guy?
Look, I also have to be honest. Part of it is also wishful thinking, right? Where you despise a politician so much and you want the allegations to be true so badly that you start imagining evidence where it doesn't exist, or taking something that isn't really proof of anything and kind of latching onto it as if it is proof. And that happened a lot with Donald Trump. It happened a lot with Donald Trump when it came to the Russia investigation. And it's sometimes you want something so badly that you see things that don't exist. And I think that there's a lot of that going on as well. The other part of this is there's all sorts of allegations about how the Biden White House is not cooperating with this investigation, but there's plenty of evidence indicating that they are cooperating with this investigation. And in fact, Ian Sams, the same White House spokesperson that I mentioned earlier, put out a memo making it abundantly clear, pushing back against the allegations that they're not cooperating and making it abundantly clear that they are, saying their own witnesses and documents have time after time debunked their false allegations. Faced with this level of failure theater, I like that phrasing, these same extreme House Republicans now appear to be trying to invent claims of obstruction and stonewalling to rationalize their illegitimate so-called impeachment inquiry. Claims of obstruction and snowballing are easily refuted by the facts. Those House Republicans don't have to simply take our word for it. They should listen to comments from their own colleagues, such as Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, who has bragged on TV that he has received 100% of what we've requested, and even said we're in the downhill phase of this investigation now because we have so many documents, which, by the way, is true. He did say that on national television. It is amazing. As the Washington Post reported this week, the memo continues, so far the Biden administration has largely cooperated with the House GOP's various oversight efforts. So I fact-checked that portion of the memo as well. I'm never gonna take anyone's word for it. I wanna look and see if the Washington Post actually did report that. And they did. In fact, they continue to write, nearly a dozen former and current administration officials have appeared before the committee and congressional investigators that have appeared before them, obtained thousands of pages of private banking records, along with over 2,000 pages of suspicious activity reports from the Treasury Department, as well as documents from the National Archives. So where exactly are they not cooperating with the sham investigation? They're cooperating because it's a sham investigation and there's nothing to be found, which I love, like continue doing that. But now they're getting so salty about how embarrassing this is for the House Republicans that they're making all sorts of ridiculous, unfounded allegations about the lack of cooperation by the Biden White House.
Yeah, look, guys, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, but I'm fairly furious with Joe Biden. If Joe Biden had done this, I'd be the first to tell you. But there's no damn evidence. So, okay, here's another excellent evidence to the contrary of what the Republicans are saying. So Hunter Biden calls their bluff and says, come on, I'll come in and testify publicly. And then the Republicans go, no, we only want it in private. Why? If he's guilty, wouldn't you want to grill him in public? If you said to me, hey, Jane, you can grill Donald Trump in public or in private, I'd be like, that's a no-brainer, in public, obviously. I want to present the evidence and see what he has to say. I want to call him out on his BS. And most importantly, I want the American people to see it, right? The Republicans say, no, we don't want it in public, because then people will find out they're lying. Instead, they want to do it in private and then pretend he said certain things. They're such obvious liars. It's so overwhelmingly obvious. But people only want to see what they want to see. And so, by the way, this is just the beginning. If Trump wins this next election, which he now has an excellent chance, an overwhelming chance of winning, they're gonna start putting people up for trial and evidence not required. All
right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we'll catch up with our homeboy, George Santos.
Let's go to YouTube members. Just one more time, two things. Our newsletter is tyt.com/newsletter. Make sure you're checking that out. At least gives you a progressive perspective every morning, and news you're not getting elsewhere. And speaking of news, the Democratic response to the GOP debates is right here on TYT. That's on Wednesday, 10 o'clock Eastern, right after the Republican debate. Tune in here. Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, and myself will be on as candidates, and John Iderolo of Damage Report will be hosting and moderating. All right, let's go to our members. Over 9,000 writes in, Anna is pretty in pink. Thanks for keeping a smile on when possible. I can't imagine how hard it is. Well, you've seen today how hard it is. Earthling Dragon says, the story of the IDF lies reminds me of that debate you had, Cenk, with that so-called rabbi. He was so monstrous, I could not get his ugliness out of my mind for days. You're not alone. And that guy's not, I don't want anybody to hold anything against rabbis because of so-called Rabbi Shmuley. I don't know if he has any congregation, I don't know, like he's just a TV rabbi. And he's a guy who excuses anti-Semitism all the time for money. So he's, anyway, in the general, well, Bobby's in the general election. Bobby Kennedy, after he said Ashkenazi Jews might have genetically, or the virus might be genetically engineered to protect Ashkenazi Jews, which sounds like an anti-Semitic trope that the Jews control the world, etc. So-called Rabbi Shmuley came in to defend him. So, oh no, there's no anti-Semitism about that. Okay, he's an obvious corrupt person. He also defended Michael Jackson when Michael Jackson wrote terrible lines about Jews in his songs. So that's who Rabbi Shmuley is. Next TYT reporter says, you guys expressing your opinions and showing that you actually care is why I watch the show. Don't let the haters get to you. Keep giving us your unrestricted opinion. Thank you, we appreciate it. And the only reason we can is because of you guys. Because if we run out of money, then we can't give you this and this whole thing goes away and all you have left is mainstream media. TYT.com/join. I do declare wrote in, you were correct about Debbie Dingell not saying anything about a ceasefire. I reached out to her since she's my rep and she gave the capped response about humanitarian aid, nothing about a ceasefire. Her district's pretty Muslim. There's a lot of Muslim Americans in her district. I don't know what she thinks she's doing. And I'm sure that Democratic Majority for Israel and AIPAC have threatened her and said, we'll run $4 million, $8 million worth of ads against you. Are you gonna pretend that that lobby doesn't exist? Is that mainstream media is gonna pretend, oh yeah, what they spent against Nina Turner or Summer Lee, it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. If you say things that are true, anti-Semitic, yeah, move away, go. And by the way, I also, this is super important, guys. I don't want any anti-Semitic crap in the chats or anywhere else, okay? It's about Israel and their actions. It is not about being Jewish. That is antithetical to who we are. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Nicholas Pecora, Bruce Baker, Serge Turan, and Mai Waba, they all just joined, and we appreciate you guys. We can't do, it's very literal that we can't do the show without you guys. Please join if you can. And Benjamin Morrill gifted a membership, and Bucks, after I yelled at him, gifted 5 Young Turks memberships anyway. Thank you, brother. Thank you for having an open mind. All right, Anna.
Yes. All right. So let's get to George Santos, who's real salty after the House voted to expel him.
Day after George Santos' historic expulsion from the House of Representatives.
Congressman, what do you say to your constituents? Excuse me. You guys got to get out of my way.
Santos making clear he's not going away quietly, taking to social media and going after his former colleagues, promising to file Monday morning ethics complaints.
Who knew that disgraced freshman Republican Congressman George Santos would be the comedic relief that we all so desperately need? But yes, there he is, ex-Congressman George Santos. He promised to take revenge on his former colleagues last Friday. But how legit are the accusations that he's lodging against them? Well, we'll take a look at one of them, or all of them, one by one and find out. Now, Santos stated that he is targeting 5 representatives, 3 of whom happen to be Republicans. Every single one of those 5, though, did in fact vote to expel him from Congress following a House Ethics Committee report indicating that he had used or misused donor funds on Botox and OnlyFans. And that's aside from the criminal investigations he's facing on top of it all. Now, let's start with Santos's threats against the Democrats. Last week, he filed a motion, or last week, Santos filed a motion to expel Representative Pramila Jayapal over the fire alarm nothing burger scandal.
You mean Jamal Bowman, right? It must be Jamal Bowman.
Yeah, he did. Oh, sorry, my bad. He did specifically note Jamal Bowman, not Pramila Jayapal. That I misspoke, my bad there. So this is what he wrote. Let's see who will be the Republican that will have the testicular fortitude to pick up my privileged motion to expel Bowman and reintroduce it. Hashtag expel Bowman. Now, Santos also pledged to file an ethics complaint against Representative Robert Menendez to investigate any connection with his father, Senator Bob Menendez's alleged corruption. So here's what he wrote on X, formerly known as Twitter. Monday's 4th ethics report will be filed, I guess, filed on Congressman Menendez, not to be confused with the senator. While Congressman Menendez has not been invoked by the diligent investigation of the DOJ into his father, there remains a question of what did he know and when did he know it? The complaint is to seek clarification from the freshman congressman on his involvement with his father's overseas dealings over the years and any potential compensation he received. I think it's a fair point to make sure we weed out the doubt surrounding Representative Menendez and his business associations with his father. I will leave it to the Office of Congressional Ethics to investigate the material I'll be submitting to them. So Jake, I haven't heard anything about Menendez's family members being involved in any of these corruption scandals. But it could be possible. What do you think?
No. Okay. So his wife was definitely involved, but I say no, not because I know definitively, but because that's not how our justice system works. So the Justice Department did not have any evidence, didn't even mention his son. So why are we talking about his son? He's like, he even said it, the diligent investigation of the Department of Justice had nothing on the son, but what did he know and when did he know it? Okay, the DOJ also had nothing on George Santos related to Bob Menendez, but what did he know and when did he know it? I mean, we could say that about anybody. Okay,
yeah.
So like the dad, the Bob Menendez Sr., the senator, is a corrupt pig. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I loathe the guy and he should be ridden out of the Senate immediately. But the sins of the father are not passed on to the son. The question is, did he do anything with his dad or not? And that's not even a question because no one's even charged that other than Santos pulling it out of his you know where.
Okay, so that does it for the 2 Democrats that he's been targeting. And by the way, just going back to
say Bowman.
Yeah, can I say something about Bowman? So look, Bowman pulled the fire alarm. Okay, it's abundantly clear. I suspected that was the case. I didn't know for sure, but I thought his excuse was ridiculous, and I wish I was clearer about that because I remember having our production meeting discussion about it, and I was like, come on, the sign is super clear, he pulled the fire alarm. Yeah. But do I think he should be expelled from Congress over that? No.
Yeah, so I wanted to clarify that too because I was actually wrong about that. So I think the sign is very confusing, but I said, hold on, okay. I said it, look, let's find the whole video and then we'll have the whole answer. Because if in the video he's looking around confused at the sign, then you'll know that he misunderstood the sign. Well, we eventually got the whole video. And when we got the whole video, he's not looking confused at the sign. He takes the sign and hides it.
Yes.
Oh no, then he definitely did it. Okay.
He definitely did it, but tell the fine people, because I'm so mad at myself that I didn't fight you on this. I just felt like it was worthless and I just moved on. But tell the fine people what happened in our production meeting.
Yeah, you were more skeptical about it, 100%, that's right, okay? But we didn't have the full video. Anyways, look, bottom line though is, you know what you get for pulling a fire alarm? Detention. You don't get expelled from Congress and have your life ruined. It's a dumb thing to do, but it's a slap on the wrist. It's not, you don't get expelled for that. You get expelled for stealing from your donors and using it for OnlyFans. Okay.
And Botox, yeah. All right, now let's move on to the 3 Republicans he's targeting. So he threatened to file an ethics complaint against every single one of them, starting with Representative Nicole Maliotakis. So he says, Monday I will be filing an official complaint with the Office of Congressional Ethics against Maliotakis regarding her questionable stock trading since joining the Ways and Means Committee this Congress. Before joining the committee, the Congresswoman didn't have an active trading habit or a high volume stake. The question is, what set of information is she trading with? Well, listen, George, the question is, what kind of insider trading is happening in a very widespread fashion within Congress? Why are you just targeting one Republican lawmaker on this?
Yeah, look, maybe he has information on her that we don't, because it seems random to us. I mean, there's, as you say, there's dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, that are doing insider trading. And Nancy Pelosi has blocked any efforts to change that. She did back when she was Speaker of the House. And so, but maybe he has info on her that we don't know. But for now, you have to actually present the evidence.
Yes.
So not guilty, as far as we know.
Maliotakis took office back in January of 2021. According to Capital Trades, she has made 6 stock trades during her time in Congress. 3 of those trades took place in early 2022. The other 3 took place in early 2023. So unsurprisingly, Santos's claim is a little dishonest, but I think every single member of Congress who's trading individual stocks should absolutely be investigated, because I mean, when you look at Nancy Pelosi alone, the fact that she has managed to beat the stock market every single year makes me question whether she's trading based on insider information she's getting through closed door briefings. But anyway, next on Santos's list is Representative Mike Lawler. He says on Monday, I will be filing an ethics complaint against Mike Lawler for questionable campaign finance violations. Congressman Lawler owns a portion of Checkmate Strategies, and he uses the same firm that he is a beneficiary of to pay for services related to his campaign. The concerning questions are, is Mr. Lawler engaging in laundering money from his campaign to his firm, then into his own pocket? I will let the Office of Congressional Ethics be the judge of that. So this one is actually tougher to fact check, because our research only turned up one report by City and State New York on what Santos is referring to. So that being said, here's what the report states. Lawler used money from both his state and federal election campaigns to pay for a consulting firm called Checkmate Strategies. Lawler co-founded Checkmate Strategies, and he was a partner at the firm while he was running for the House in 2022. But the report also states that according to both state and federal law, candidates may spend campaign money on businesses or holdings that they have a stake in, so long as they pay market rate, and the expenses are for bona fide campaign purposes.
So it's worth looking into, but he doesn't have that publicly. There's not enough evidence yet. But by the way, if he's actually concerned about that, he should ask about Donald Trump. Donald Trump has funneled millions upon millions of donor money into his own hotels and estates. And saying, oh, we are using it for the campaign. And in fact, he has increased the rent 5-fold when he had his donors pay for the rent at Trump Tower. So, but George Santos thinks that Daddy Trump could protect him, so he's picking on randos instead of the guy who does it the most.
Look, all of this is obviously and very clearly politically motivated. And so far, the allegations that he's put out there are not that great. And he hasn't provided any evidence for the allegations that he's putting out there. I'm just disappointed in him because I feel like given his time in Congress, and it wasn't long, but given the time that he was in Congress, I feel like he would have a lot more dirt. I mean, Madison Cawthorn certainly had more dirt.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're in a den of thieves and that's all you could come up with. And that's because he's lazy, doesn't do his homework, right? All you had to do is ask around a little bit. I mean, it's shooting fish in a barrel for corrupt congressmen.
Yeah,
so
totally, 100%.
Yeah, I bet there's tons of dirt, especially on the Republican congressman, but you came up with this weak sauce instead. That's pretty normal for Santos, because like winning things legitimately and proving your case legitimately is hard work. Cheating and lying is relatively easy.
All right, the first 10 minutes of our members only bonus episode will be free to all, so you guys can get a little sneak peek of what we do. So check that out, and for you guys who happen to be members, you get the whole bonus episode undeterred, like you don't have to worry about it going out after 10 minutes. tyt.com/join, we'll see you there.
Let's see how Earth responds to that.
All right, back on the bonus episode, Cenk and Anna with you guys. For the uninitiated, if you're not a member, normally we'll talk about some extra stories. The members will get those first, and they might not go out for quite some time. And we'll talk about our personal lives. But we're gonna give you 10 minutes here, and so that everybody can sample.
Yeah, we typically cover stories that are a little more fun, a little more wacky, like the one that I'm about to share with you, having to do with a Folgers ad dating back to 2009. So let's get into it. In 2009, the coffee company Folgers released what they thought was a sweet, innocent advertisement about two siblings reuniting. But the ad went viral because all these weirdos and perverts tried to make too much of it, and they saw something that I personally didn't see, didn't realize until it was making headlines today. And it had to do about how the siblings seemed to be a little too affectionate with one another. So let's take a look at the ad, and then I'll fill you in on what I'm talking about here.
I must have the wrong house.
Sister? Oh, I missed you so much. They waited up all night for you, you know.
It's a long way from West Africa. Oh, real coffee.
He's here.
I brought you something from far away.
Really? Oh.
What are you doing?
You're my present this year.
People think that it's too incesty. Cenk, do you think it's too incesty?
The best part of waking up.
Listen.
No, I'm not gonna finish it. Okay, so I'm torn on it because I hadn't seen it until this. This apparently comes up every couple of years as to whether this is a pro-incest commercial. Okay. So I hadn't seen it until this year, and so I don't know what I would have thought in an unbiased way, but they put the thought into my head and I couldn't get it out because they're too close in age to one another. She had to be younger for that ad to work as sister brother, right? But the part of the beginning of the ad is, oh, you grew up so much since I've been gone, right? And then, but they look too longingly into each other's eyes like, you're my present this time.
Okay, no, she didn't say it like that. Okay, I think the acting in that commercial was terrible. It felt super fake. I think that they gazed at each other too long. Yes, I agree with that. But I don't know. I never got the feeling that it was inappropriate. I got the feeling that there's the sister. She really misses her older brother. He's been away. He's been in South Africa, I think he said.
No, he said West Africa. By the way,
West Africa. Okay.
By the way, nobody's talking about the actual racism in that ad, which is he's like, oh, I was away so long in West Africa. Real coffee, finally. By the way,
freaking Folgers.
Okay.
Folgers. By the way, my dad not only loves Folgers, he doesn't even mess with the stuff you have to brew. He likes the instant coffee version of Folgers.
Okay, good.
So there are people out there, believe it or not, who are into Folgers.
Yeah, of course, why not? So, but
the best coffee?
Too Strong Coffee, obviously. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. Okay, so no, what I was gonna say is, by the way, coffee was discovered in Africa.
Yeah, of course.
Folgers, real coffee. So you're not buying it. You don't think that it feels incesty at all?
Okay, that ad came out in 2009. I saw it a billion times since then. Okay. That thought never crossed my mind. Maybe I'm too innocent. Maybe I don't have the pervy mind that others do. But now that I watch it, it's like I guess I see it.
I'm curious, Edwin, what do you think? No, you don't see it at all? That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know what to think.
You're my present.
Okay, so last two things, and then we're gonna rewatch it, obviously. So cue it back up. One is in the beginning when he's like, oh, I must be at the wrong address. She just says, sister. I thought that was so weird and awkward.
It's the writing is bad. The actors that they hired for the commercial, bad.
That's something I was gonna say. I mean, I feel bad for the actors because the director is supposed to also guide them, right?
Yes.
Like the director should have said less romancy, more sibling-y, right?
Yeah.
Because when they're like, I don't know.
No, they don't do that. Come on.
Okay, all right, so we ready to watch it one more time so we could all judge to see?
Yes.
Okay, all right, let's watch.
I must have the wrong house.
Sister? Oh, I missed you so much. They waited up all night for you,
It's a long way from West Africa. Oh, real coffee.
He's here.
I brought you something from far away.
Really? Oh.
What are you doing?
You're my present this year.
I just think it was poorly executed. The idea behind it was sweet, but I gotta tell you, after that came out, apparently it became a meme and some publications had some pretty hilarious headlines. So let's start with the Daily Dot, which in 2012 had the headline, "How to talk to your family about that Folgers incest commercial."
Jesus.
Several other outlets like BuzzFeed and the like have covered it in the years since. How did I miss this? I totally missed this until literally today when it was pitched at our production meeting. There have been, by the way, several parodies of the ad in which the implicit sexual tension is made even more explicit. There's even a Folger-cest fandom of writers and artists who have spent their time and energy making tributes to the ad. You guys need help, man. You guys need help. But let's go to the 10 years later retrospective. So 10 years after the ad's release, GQ interviewed some of the people who worked on it. Jerry Boyle is the senior vice president and executive producer at Saatchi and Saatchi, the ad agency working with Folgers at the time, and was taken aback by how the ad was interpreted. It was all very, very innocent. Obviously, what's happened since then has been a real something that nobody imagined happening. And our client is so wholesome, it was, we thought, emotional. What people read into it once it took off was just insane. And everything was completely innocent on the set. There was nothing while we were filming it or editing it that anybody ever felt that way.
Now they're bothering to have to explain that the actors didn't actually have sex afterwards.
They're being like waterboarded. Did they have sex? Did they have sex?
By the way, I don't think anyone actually thinks that they meant it as an incest ad. Like the joke is that it accidentally comes off that way. So like these like serious responses of like, don't worry, no one actually had incest on the set. Of course, I would hope not.
But then Ray Dillman, who's the director of the ad, kind of screws things up a little bit.
Oh no.
In telling GQ the following, quote, "They had fun with each other."
Oh no, come on. I told you it was the director's fault in the first place. Ray, I feel bad, I get it. You were just trying to make an ad, but.
But let me continue with the rest of the quote. "I didn't see anything that would have indicated that it could be interpreted any other way."
Well, that was kind of the issue, that you should have seen that, but didn't, but okay.
But to be fair, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the thing. Maybe both the director and I are innocent.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. And then that ironically makes Folgers even more innocent. That they'd never even crossed their minds. They certainly wouldn't have done it on purpose, right? So there you go. There's an argument for Folgers being the most wholesome.
But here's the real controversy. I think this is the real question that people should be asking. Is the best part of waking up Folgers in your cup? Is it?
Oh no, I just thought of a meme. The best part of waking up is 2 girls and.
No, that is not. That is not. That is a reference to something that no one should know about ever. Okay, dating back to 07. All right, anyway, should we move on?
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing. So we've got, some fun video from Trump's rally in Iowa. So let's get to it.
Is there anything that President Biden did that you like?
No, I can't think of that, you know.
Is there anything that he's done as president that has been